We are live. So peace, peace, peace. I am Phillip Roundtree, and you are tuned into the April 27th edition of Rhetorically Speaking. We have a dope conversation on deck for you guys today. Uh, Not sure. We got several people that's chilling in the background right now. We're about to bring them on because I wanted to have a real conversation about this idea of just identity, whether we're talking about gender identity, sexuality. I think it's an important conversation for us to have, especially for those who identify as men. And we know that this is a hashtag You Good Man Monday, where we typically have cis brothers who come on and have conversation, but we know that this group is open to anybody who identifies as male. And so with this, I knew I wasn't uh, I recognize my limitations in having this conversation. I think it's important that we get the perspective of just other human beings. I think first and foremost that we're talking about this idea of people being human beings. And then we'll get into just how we've been conditioned, how we've been socialized to view things, to view ideas such as gender identity, and sexuality. So I asked these amazing people to come on and have this conversation with me, and with us and the people. So first, I want to introduce, and we're going to unmute her. Shout out to Queen Tally, who might not be the easiest person to get in contact with. I think I didn't hit her DM up like several times. But Queen Tally is a woman who's I was privileged enough to be on a panel with some months back last year. I think it was last October, and she was able to give honest and heartfelt perspective on what it's like to be a trans woman right now, right? And I think the reason why I wanted her on in particular is because she keeps it real. You know what I mean? She keeps it real. She's raw. She's authentic. She's passionate. She gonna tell you how it is and how exactly and tell you exactly what she's feeling. And I think that's important when we have, open and honest dialogue and conversations like these. So shout out to Queen Tally. Thank you for joining us tonight. You just gonna wave, you ain't gonna say hi. You gotta unmute. We're gonna unmute you. All right, there we go. There you go.
Hello.
I did. No, I just wanted to say thank you for joining us tonight.
Oh,
Again,
thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
no doubt, no doubt. The next person I want to introduce is the good brother Zane. He's on here on a weekly basis. He is our resident American Negro dancer. And again, he's an openly gay male. I think he revealed that last week to the rhetorically speaking public. But again, he's somebody who I look to, um, as I'm gonna call you an elder, Zane, as an elder when I want to really have just and get some insight into just things that's happening in the world. And so I know a topic like this is near and dear to him. So shout out to you, Zane, for
Hello,
coming
hello.
on.
Thanks. I enjoy these talks.
Next we have Jay. What's your last name, Jay? Or we just gonna call you Jay?
Honesty, but you can just call me Jay.
Shout out to Jay. He is a comic book aficionado to the point where he has his own comic book. So what's the name of the comic book that you have, Jay?
Messengers of the Hidden Truth. Facebook, Instagram, website site is foreshadowcomics.com.
Word. And Jay is another brother who's always opinionated. I don't necessarily is that I think that's yours. I think that's you, Jay. It's a little crinkly. Yeah.
My what?
I think it's I think your phone was acting up a little bit. A little noisy.
Your phone is
sound?
your
Yeah.
phone is eating potato chips.
Yeah, try to put your headphones back in. But shout out to Jay. The reason why I wanted to have Jay on is because again, I don't necessarily always agree with Jay when he comments on my post. But again, he's somebody who I respect, and he always offers his opinion in a respectful way. So shout out to him. Next we have Mr. Raphael Freeman, who again is a dope brother who I enjoy having conversations with. He, one of the most opinionated people that I know. And again, if you starting to know,
Me.
if you haven't noticed something, I've been trying to surround myself with people who are going to challenge me to think. And Raphael has done that from the first day that I met him to give me just different ways to look at different topics that's taking place. He's also a podcast host. What's the name of your podcast, Raphael?
It's called Heterodox Americana.
Heterodox Americana. You got to Google the name just like I had to figure out what heterodox mean. But that's what I'm talking about. He challenged you to do to be better. And last but not least, we have our resident social masters in social work. Congrats to the good brother Mike, who graduated with his masters in social work from Temple University. So
Thank you.
salute to him. He's always somebody who, he's our token white guy. If you haven't noticed, no, I play our kid, but no, he's so much more than that. Again, he offers dope perspectives on different things, and I just wanted to have him on, and he's been on for the last few weeks, just again giving some amazing perspective. So again, this conversation is just about the idea of gender identity and sexuality, and this stemmed from I'm 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 having so I'm writing my memoir, and I came upon a chapter. Uh, the memoir is about my life, and so it's about this idea of sexual identity, and it's been difficult for me. Well, I finished the chapter. It took me literally about 3 to 4 months to finish the chapter because there were some certain truths that that I was that I've accepted in my day to day life, right? But in writing it out, it was just like, wow. I didn't realize that I was experiencing all of this during my 20s when we talk about this understanding of my sexual identity. I started to think about the people who, like my friends, when they read this chapter, if they choose to read the chapter, how they might perceive me. And it was just like, yo, there was never space for me to explore my sexual identity. And then I started to think about the broader landscape and just those who identify as male being able to explore who they are. And so I wanted to bring this conversation to the people because again, it's not just me, right? It's other people out there, and some of you brothers will hear about Zane and his journey to understand himself. We'll hear from Queen Tally to hear about her journey to understanding who she is. But I just thought it was important for me in particular to have this conversation because the more I want to walk in my truth, I realize that it's uncomfortable, right? So but I won't grow unless I really start to lean into these uncomfortable truths that have existed in my life. So I guess my first question would be, or you could just comment on it, just this idea of identity, whether it's gender, whether it's sexuality, and just what's been the biggest influencer for how you understand your identity. So we can start with Zane. We go with you since you're the resident old head.
Okay. It's funny because when we were supposed to talk about this a couple of weeks ago, and I think I'm gonna start from a negative perspective of identity, and I think sometimes I feel trapped, and I feel trapped by my own habits, and I feel trapped by my own um, idea of how I want to be perceived, if that makes sense. Um, and so when you talk about identity, you talk about choices, not only choices, but reactions, right? So I remember when I was younger and I was a very feminine young man, I encountered a lot of violence in my neighborhood, so I had to fight. So even though I managed to keep my sexual identity as a gay man and to grow into that, I think I still adapted a version of being a gay man that holds on to stereotypical cisgender male tropes, if that makes any sense. You know what I mean? So, and I talk about this with Raphael sometimes too, you know what I mean, about having choices and feeling that even in sexual encounters with other people, I feel like, why do I not explore women anymore? You know what I mean? I'm not attracted to them in a completely sexual way, but I'm definitely, and you and Kabina joke with me all the time, I definitely appreciate, you know, women's bodies and things like that. So the fluidity of it, anyway, my point is that I think that there's a trap that can happen inside of a identity that becomes a habit and not something that you actually investigate, for lack of a better term.
Anybody else want to chime in?
Yeah, could I jump in on that actually?
Go ahead,
Because
Mike.
so I think that's a really big like point in identity is like how much of my identity is actually mine and how much is it society's ideas of what I should be, right? And like I came out as bi like 2 years ago, right? But I spent years convincing myself I was straight and putting on this like hyper masculine straight mask at all times, right? So I adopted parts of myself that weren't really me. So I totally get what Zane's talking about with this idea of tropes, because I was so afraid of being exposed as a bi male and then having to adopt a new kind of masculinity. I just decided just to adopt what society puts out there as masculinity. What is a man supposed to represent? What do I have to be in this situation? Have to be alpha at all times? Like all these ideas that weren't my own and that I really didn't start to investigate until I finally allowed myself to be okay in the fact that I am a bi male. That's what I am. I'm bisexual. I'm not straight. But it like you have to work against what society tells you should be.
Word. What about you, Jay? I'm gonna bring you on because
Everyone can hear me?
yeah, you good.
Okay, yeah, I just put my earphones in. I can't think of a time growing up where I ever questioned my identity. Masculinity, well, that's another thing. I mean, being young, adolescent, then a man. I mean, I've seen so many different examples of I guess, perceived masculinity or what it should be. Growing up in a home, single mother, and my sister, I was the only male in my house. So, I mean, that right there, I had a lot of, questions. I guess as far as concerning masculinity, but as far as like my sexual identity, I can't think of a time where I ever like took an extra thought and just sat back and really tried to process like a sexual preference. That was never a thing for me. But masculinity, I think that could be a whole nother topic for me. Because not having like a stable father figure growing up, and what or how a man's supposed to conduct himself as far as being a man. You know, because growing up in Philly, then I grew up in the South, I seen so many different examples. Good, definitely saw some bad. And I did, even as a child, I noticed what most people would consider toxic, womanizing, things of that nature. Even though that was pretty much some of my prime examples here and there. I mean, it was some good, but I seen some bad. But I never gravitated towards that. You know.
Word. What about you, Queen Tally? Just you coming into your womanhood, how was that experience for you?
Well, see, identity is it's a complicated subject because of the simple fact. See, I used to say I'm a transgender woman until somebody, I was in prison one time and I was on a van, and then somebody said, "No, you're not a transgender woman." And I said, "Huh?" And I said, "What?" And I really didn't understand, but then they broke it down to me. My name is Alonda, who happens to be a transgender woman who happens to be Black. So I am myself first, and all them characteristics come after me. So, meaning I had to find myself first. So, as the years go on, I said, well, what is really masculinity and what is really femininity? I said, wait, somebody actually said this is masculine and that's feminine because the verses could have been twisted, and that could have been feminine and this could have been masculine. So I mean, I could take this like real deep if I wanted to. But I'm not gonna go that far because I'll go all day. But so with me, with identity is myself first. And myself first is whatever I find comfortable for me.
Yeah.
Now, as far as me, sometimes I'll give you, I'm very ladylike. But when you get me mad, you will see a very masculine side of me that I have no problem bringing out. That I have no problem. But who's to say what is what?
Yeah.
Because that could be a very feminine side to some people, the way I act. But I think it's very masculine because who you said that was masculine, I said this was feminine. Like, for instance, the Black man sees a white man and you say, and we say that he's feminine, but the white man considers himself masculine. So identity can go but so many ways. But for me, I have came into my identity, whatever I call myself is what I identify myself. Is whatever I see in my eyes. So that's what identity is to me. Whatever I see myself in my eyes, whenever I look in that mirror and say that's me, that's my identity. Whatever I call myself.
So however it is you decide to define yourself,
no matter
that's what
what
it
you
is.
think, and that's the thing. No matter what you think, no matter what my lovers think I am, because my lover can consider himself or herself. My lover can consider himself a gay man, but I can still consider him a straight man. It's whatever I say I am because it's my identity.
Word. What about you, Raphael?
So, I like what Queen Telly had to say because we really do have these layers of identity. And they all these layers, they get fashioned in different ways. I hope that y'all can hear me okay
Yeah,
because
you're fine.
I'm getting choppy. Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. But so much of my early identity was kind of forged in like all the things you think about what hypermasculinity, like all of those type of things. And so that's part of me. When I say like kind of forged in that, when I was like 10, um, like like the older guys in our neighborhood, they would fight us like dogs, like put us on our knees, and I would be fighting somebody, and they would force us to fight till the other kid hit the ground. So in the summertime, they probably fought us like 3 times a week, something like that. Uh, I'd easily had maybe 300 fights by the time I was out of high school. So in terms of how that connects to masculinity, the way that we think about masculinity, certainly this kind of hyper masculine or toxic masculinity, for a really long time, probably until college, I went around with this idea like I wish somebody would, and that was like this secret part of kind of me that I would hold on to. Like I was just always waiting for somebody to step out of line so I could show them business.
Yeah.
But then, and that was kind of how I defined my masculinity. It didn't really, so, I thought about my blackness, but I never really had to examine anything until I met a neighbor of mine who was trans, who was a femme trans guy. And then I had to think about how much of, so one, what it was like for them when they had to move to the world, and the types of, I would say, privileges that, even though I never thought of myself as privileged before, the privileges that I just had to acknowledge because I didn't have to navigate the identity in the world that way. But it also forced me to think about how I was constantly navigating identity, even if it was unconsciously. Um, and I just, I mean, kind of at the core of what Tally said, when I pull back all the layers, what maleness is, what blackness is, what poorness was, because that poverty was part of my identity too. I get down to just like a sense of self, and then that feels real. And then everything else feels like a construct that I'm not even committed to. Like I can walk away from any of that at any point because ultimately, I won't say it doesn't matter, but the truest essence of me, I think, is the core. Is just my consciousness.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point that you and Queen Tally brought up. I think everybody, brought up, dope points, and it resonated with me when we talk about this idea of, Jay mentioned this idea of masculinity, um, and how it informed how I saw myself, and how others saw me. I've always, I grow up, I was always the quiet person, and so me being quiet, it was automatically something. What's going on with him? What's happening with him? But I'm not partaking in some of the behaviors that one would deem as toxic, right? Automatically, you're gay, right? If you're not laughing at misogynistic behaviors that's taking place, and so for me, I felt compelled to have to participate, right? Just so I don't become ostracized, because I mean, ultimately, especially when we talk about during our formative years, peer acceptance means so much to us. And I think once I got into my 20s, and I really started to have this who am I moment, right? What am I attracted to moment? It caused for me personally to be in like this deep depression for a long period of time, and I found myself too afraid to explore, right? Because I didn't have permission. Who would give me permission to do that? I damn sure couldn't give myself permission to explore. And then it was just like just so many factors and influences that would have me not truly try to understand who I am, void of labels, just understanding what it is that I like, what it is that I desire. And it wouldn't be until I got into my late 20s, my 30s, where it's just like, you know what, this is who I am, right? And so it's not about defining myself by these labels that people want to attribute to me, like Queen Tally said, like Raphael said, but it's just, am I comfortable in self? Am I comfortable with who I am? But I sit and I think when I would work with kids, I would work with young boys, it would just be like, man, it's certain things that you just aren't allowed to do, right? You aren't allowed to figure out who you are, because there's not going to be a place safe enough for you to be able to. And so, I salute people who walk in their truth, right? So Zane, Queen Tally, Michael, Jay, Ralph, for those who walk in their truth, but it feels like it takes so long for so many of us, especially as those who identify as male, to truly walk in our truth, because society isn't constructed for that to take place.
And there's
Um,
violence. I think the key factor in a lot of it is the violence. That was one of the things that I loved about the movie Moonlight, is that it showed the violence that happens when you step outside of the box as an adolescent, and so you get trapped in that space. You get trapped in that space of masculinity as it's defined by a violent culture, and that's what Raphael was saying about his experience. That was violence that defined his masculinity.
yeah,
I mean, you grow up in a violent society. You're scared to step right or step left. You know what I mean? Unless it's in context like prison or someplace like that. Then for some reason, all the boundaries disappear.
Hmm. Good. You want to say something, Tally? Go ahead.
Right. So,
Yeah.
if I could hop in here, both of these things, I kind of want to touch on what Phil said, and really, Zane, I think, I mean, you helped put a finer point on it for me. That part of what the violence allowed me to do was to explore some parts of the world with really no repercussion, because I knew that I had this violent, let's say, skill set that would back me up. But kind of to your point, Phil, there was at least one moment where I felt like, so I took my daughter to out because I just thought that she needed to be there. I thought that she needed to see it, and just part of my kind of commitment to community, commitment to queer activism. I just needed to be there. And then they had this whatever year it was this dope dog that they had somebody had painted the dog the rainbow, like the color of the rainbow flag. And I posted it on Facebook. My cousin, I was talking about Outfest, and my cousin, he said, out of what, or out for what? It's like, do tell. In this way that it was like, I know you're not saying that you're gay. And for all of the kind of protections that I thought I had.
Oh, you're breaking up, bro.
World.
We're gonna mute you 1 second, Ralph. You go ahead, Queen Tally. I know you wanted to say something. Raphael breaking up right now.
So yeah. But Zane was saying how the fight and stuff. See, for me, it took a lot. I heard, what was that question? I see the question that somebody had asked.
I'll see if I can repost it.
Well, I think, like, for instance, for me, it says we have so many categories and classifications. Can our ideas change over time? People feel yes. Now I'm gonna touch into that because that's about to carry on what I'm about to say. Now, I started transitioning, really getting into my transition in 2005. Then, because I grew up in a Bible-based family, I went back to detransition to being a boy, tried to be a boy, do the whole straight thing, and that wasn't working. But during that time, it was unsafe for me to be a boy because a lot of people confused me as a lesbian. And then I got into fights if I was drunk or something, and they would attack me. So it was safer for me to be a girl because everything that you see here is what I had as a boy. So with that being said and whatnot, hold on. Yeah, I'm sorry. So with that being said, I'm sorry, it's in the microwave. It's everything. So that I was unprotected. I remember I came down the street drunk and I was so feminine. The boys thought I was a girl with a suit on, and then they attacked me and beat me. And then I went back to being a girl. But I went back and forth. So over the time, you can change. Your identity do change over time and whatnot.
Yeah.
So we have so many characters. Can our identity change over time? A lot. Now, what I noticed now these days, especially within the trans community, we have something called gender non-binary. And gender non-binary, now, I'm going to tell you what I thought gender non-binary was. I thought gender non-binary meant you didn't have a problem being called a girl or a boy. But I was wrong. Gender non-binary is you don't go by either or. You go by they and them pronouns. You go by they and them pronouns. With that being said, people start out, especially some trans people, they start out as, say, for instance, a trans woman. I might start out as a trans woman, but as time goes on, I may get all the body parts of a woman, but I feel like sometimes I want to be masculine or sometimes I want to be feminine. You know what? The heck with that. I'm gender non-binary. So call me they and them. So yes, your gender can change over time as you start discovering yourself more and more. And it's going back to, depending on what your belief is. I'm Christian. So to share a little story off of that, before Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit, they didn't have no gender. So to me, knowledge was the first sin. So to me, we're going back to our basics where your body, where we had no gender because that wasn't God's intention from what I understand.
Yeah.
Before they ate the forbidden fruit, and Nancy, that's a whole nother thing. So I really don't want to go into that part. Well, I really do want to go into that part, but I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah. We go hold because I want to get Jay's perspective just on this idea of just as far as identity when we hear terms like gender non-binary, just what are your views and your perception on how individuals desire to be identified?
Now, based off of what I'm understanding from Zane, I think Zane and Queen Tally, and that question that was just up there, choosing your sexual identity.
Yeah.
You don't have to be placed in a box. So I guess what I'm trying to understand is, so is it a choice as far as where your path is leading you is like an internal feeling, or am I understanding it as you can wake up one day and just, you know what, this is not what I want to be anymore. It's like just a personal choice, not like feeling, but just like you're just like a choice. Like I'm just choosing this now.
I think it's being able to go ahead, Callie.
See, okay, so this is where it comes. This was the problem with the T. It's LGBTQT. I mean LGBT. Oh, LGBT. So lesbian, gay, bisexual, or what? They are all sexualities. T is a gender. So with that being said, sexuality is different from gender. Sexuality is a performance. Sexuality is something you do private, something you do in the bed, something you really don't have to let the whole world know what you're doing. But because of history, this is why we have parades. So that's understandable. But sexuality is something you do in the street. Now, gender, on the other hand, is different. It's something you feel within yourself, something you feel inside yourself. So, with that being said, no, you do not wake up and say, oh, I changed my gender or I changed this way. It's something that was always in you, the way you feel. So all the times you are born this way. Now, with that being said, I am attracted to trans men. And people say, oh, well, that's a female. No, it's not. That is a male. Because they transition from female to male, the opposite of me. Their outer appearance gives me male. What is between their legs do not define them to me, do not define their identity. Because for all that, I don't have to touch what's in between their legs. They could put their little thing on and call it a day, especially with all the technology we have. So with that being said, I'm attracted to the male figure. Just like if a man was attracted to me, he wouldn't necessarily be considered gay because of the simple fact he's attracted to my female figure. The definition of gay or homosexuality is a male who's attracted to another male. Masculinity, not someone who's attracted to a feminine figure, but then that goes and I will go on and on.
Yeah.
And
that's a complicated topic. I completely agree with you. But when that whole Malik Yoba thing went down, and the trans sister came out, and she said what she said. Do you remember the trans sister? What's her name? I can't think of her name.
Who, the one I was talking to?
No, I don't think you were talking to her. There's a light skinned lady that was on
I know you're talking about.
the Breakfast Club.
Yeah.
I can't remember her name right now.
Yeah.
Oh, Cindy Starr.
Huh?
No. It wasn't her. It was somebody. No, it was somebody else. I know who you talking about. Go ahead. You can make your point, Zane.
Oh, my point was. First, I was just commenting on what Queen Tally said about a male being attracted to a female figure. Like, I completely agree with that. And I think one of the reasons people can't, because when Malik Yoba came out and said what he said, people were like, no, dog, you know, if you like a woman that has a penis, then you like men. I was like, how does that make sense? I mean, that doesn't make sense, because if I'm attracted to this kind of figure, because we're so limited how we understand a woman and a man, that there's no space for anything else. But there is. There are people walking around in bodies that have energies, and if you're attracted to an energy and a figure and a silhouette, you know what I mean? Because the body is just a silhouette, right? And it holds energy. Anyway, I just think there should be space for people to explore things, but you can't, because the attacks that come keep you trapped. Like, even if you wanted to, even if let me use myself as an example. Even if I wanted to explore being attracted to a trans woman, I would get pushback from gay cisgender men.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because they don't always understand trans women. Even in our community, we get stuck in being a lesbian. We get stuck in being a gay man. We get stuck in being a femme gay man. We get stuck in being all of these things that we get comfortable and safe in being. Like, sometimes I don't necessarily want to be an alpha male. You know what I mean? And when I get with people who make me feel like really soft, I like enjoy that. Like, I like to lay back. I like to let go of my toxic energy that I have. So I'm babbling, but that's my point.
Yeah. Can I jump in here? Yeah. I think you hit on a good point, and this is coming back to the idea of putting ourselves in boxes, right? Is that when we adopt a new identity, even if it's freeing in the beginning, it can become a whole new sense of like imprisonment, because we become trapped into this idea of like being performative. And Zane referenced Moonlight, and listen, Moonlight came out before I had come out, right? So I'd already had experience with men, but I had stuffed it down so much to convince myself so I could maintain the performance that I had been performing for so many years, right? And Moonlight was like an awakening, man. That movie touched me in ways that it's just beautiful. First of all, whoever's watching this right now, if you haven't seen Moonlight, you got to go see the movie. But like, so we need the box at first, I feel like, to find recognition, to find a sense of I'm home, to find a sense of I'm safe. Yeah. This coming back to what you were talking about, Phil, and saying like you had these thoughts, but at the same time, you felt like you needed permission to explore them, right? I felt like I needed permission to allow people to know that, like, yeah, like I have been with men, but I'm still me. And this comes back to Queen's idea of like identity is more than just all these different labels we ascribe to. It's the sense of, okay, but what's bisexual to me? What's male to me?
Yeah.
What does my whiteness represent? Like, these are questions I have to ask myself, because I don't want to take on, like Zane talked about, that performative aspect of identity. I don't want to always be performing.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point that you brought up. Did I meet you at Moonlight, the show?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. That's because I thought it was just a beautiful movie just about the humanity of Black boys who turn into be Black men, right? And just the difficulties and try to understand who they are. And then cinematically, I thought it was beautifully shot too. But that's what I said. When at the movie that we saw that at Uncle Bobby's, and they had the professor from Temple there, and I think was that Mark too. It might have been Mark and the professor, and it was this idea that the professor from Temple, he was talking about how the cinematography was so beautiful and how what the water represented, and I was like, I raised my hand. I was just like, it's a privilege to be able to look at that, right? It's a privilege to be able to see past that, the idea of homosexuality, to get to that point, because how I was conditioned, being a product of the hip hop generation, I'm not supposed to be able to even look past that, right? I'm not supposed to look past, in essence, I'm not supposed to look past um, the societal identification of somebody to see the humanity in them. You know what I mean? And so me where I am now, it's just like I recognize just the influencers that have influenced that. And one of the biggest things, I think, it's this idea of belongingness, right? We're all experiencing that now, where this idea to want to to commune with another, right? And so we want to do instinctively, this survival instinct is that we want to put ourselves in the best possible position to be able to engage with people, right? Even if that means denying our true selves. And so again, this idea of masculinity, that's why I hate even using those terms like toxic and what have you, because at the end of the day, we're talking about what does it take to be a human being. I think my mom brought it up. Shout out to my old head who was tuned in. And just this idea of identity and how it starts from birth, right? It's like this, congratulations, you're having a baby boy, with the blue cats and the trucks and all of these things, and then how we're programmed, right? How we're programmed to view one's identity. Right now, if we're talking about this biological piece, we understand, yes, there's penis, there's vagina, then there's those who may have both, right? But when we talk about these constructs that exist, we never again truly be able to figure out who we are, because we're told who we are as opposed to being able to explore it. Like, I think it's one of the reasons why I don't identify as, I'm agnostic. I don't identify as Christian or Muslim or Buddhist, just because I was free growing up to just figure that out on my own. But when it comes to identity, when it comes to sexuality, I think, the imagery that's pushed, this so many things are pushed to us that, we're forced to make decisions that might not necessarily be who we are. So let me see. I did have another question, and then feel free to jump in if you have any thoughts or comments.
I want to when you said when a child is born, and the blue cat, pink cat.
Don't say nothing about my mama, Jay. We're gonna have to knuckle up. You my man, I like you, but we gonna
I run way too fast when I'm scared. What was you saying? You said it's like your program. Like, do you think it's programmed, or they're just acknowledging the biological gender of the child? Now, they don't tell you to go home and how to raise that child, or they're just a male child was born. I mean, yeah, it doesn't have to be a color associated with it. I mean, that's just the world we was born into. But outside of that, I mean, I don't know if I consider that as programming. I mean, unless they handed you a list of instructions on how to raise the blue cat baby versus the pink cat baby.
But I think they do, though. I think it's all a part of the system that exists when it comes to identity. You know what I mean? And so as soon as they say boy, again, we're already conditioned from our parents, our grandparents, our great grandparents, from the media and all of these different things. And so I think that, once this happens, it just gets the wheels in motion. Go ahead, Zane, and then we go get to you, Queen Talia. I think you had your hand up.
I was just gonna say, there's a couple of famous folks that have children who are like, I can't think of her name. Her name just left my head. the basketball player and the actress that just let their take on
Dwayne Wade.
Dwayne Wade. So I think that's what it looks like when you let somebody explore something in complete freedom.
Yeah.
Like, who knows whether she may, you know what I mean? She may reject that particular version of who she is right now. But they allow her the space to move at a really young age. And some people might think it's too young, but they allowed her the space to go ahead and explore this feeling and this identification that she has. So if they had said no, that would be an example of programming. Like they can't unblock themselves from saying no. Like you can't do that. Like you can't wear that. You can't dress like that. You can't cry. You can't do all those things. Whenever somebody tells a male figure or a male identifying person or cisgender male that he can't do something because it's too feminine, that's part of programming. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like nobody would think twice about. I mean, nobody would think twice about telling a boy no in the most conventional way of raising a boy. No, you can't play with that doll. One quick story. I got on an elevator one time, and a woman's son. It was an elevator in a department store, and the boy had a feminine toy, and she was going to let him hold it until I came on. She ain't know I was gay, I guess. And she said, "Oh, you can't play with that." But he was holding it. He had to be holding it for 2 or 3 stops on the elevator before she saw me. You know what I mean? Now you worried about what I think about your son. Let your son enjoy whatever the toy is.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Queen Tally. I know you had your hand up. Then we're gonna get to Raphael who joined us.
Touch something. Okay. So you know what I wanted to say, like in the trans community, you know what I noticed that a lot of times with trans men, how when a trans man transitions, say they in a already in a lesbian relationship with their lover, that they will stay in the relationship with their lover when they become a man. But when a trans woman, say they're in a relationship with their lover as a guy, he'll drop her immediately. And I have noticed that, and I've been like, damn. So a lot of times, us trans women be attracted to our lover still want to be with him, but because he's not attracted to us, we don't keep him. And I mean, it's just be like, you know, I think that was a little bit off topic.
But you know what? What's interesting about that is the bigger point that I think you're making is the point that Billy Porter makes every time he talks about why he dresses the way he dresses, because there's a hate, a cultural hate towards women and femininity. So even as a gay male, I'm an acceptable gay male because I'm not extremely effeminate. You know what I mean? I had to suppress that when I was younger. I was an effeminate young boy, but as I got older, I became less effeminate and very, very acceptable to most people.
Yeah, yeah. I know you wanted to say something, Raphael. Welcome back. Glad you could join us.
Thank you.
You were
Sorry
at cousin. You were at the call from your cousin, just to let you know where you were in your story.
Right. I'm gonna try to be right in the moment, though. We can get back to that if it gets there. There's a documentary. I think it was on Netflix for a while, and it was called like "Do I Sound Gay?" And it was one. You know, I think it was a white gay New York guy who was trying to figure out whether or not his voice sounded too feminine. And I think this idea that you kind of were hinting at, Zane, of this internalized internalized homophobia, but also like how femme guys present and like the real kind of vitriol that I think some femme guys get even from other gay guys. And that kind of tying into what you were saying about Queen Talia. I think that's right. I think
there's a certain amount of misogyny, even within the queer community. It's going to be directed at women, and that to me is part of the programming. Even to what Jay was saying, what's the harm about the blue? When we think about this programming, if you just start with your kid saying, I have a son or I have a daughter, a boy or girl, whatever, and there's nothing attached to it, then you're in the clear. But you know that there's already all this stuff that's attached to it. And the minute the blue comes up, now you don't know what else is attached to it. I had a homie who I had to stop messing with him for this exact reason. He had kind of weakened custody of his son. And, I'll try to, clean up the language a little bit. But his son was crying because, something real trivial had happened, in the household, but he was 10. And what he said to the boy was, stop crying like an effing, homo, essentially, like the derogatory slur for that. Where he wasn't even trying to let his son have the full range of emotions as a 10-year-old. The idea that he had attached to his male son was that as a boy, you don't cry, you're not a homo, you're not a girl. And it's like, you never know what parents are going to attach to the idea of masculinity, but that blue boy, like that's the immediate sign that however you think of it, there's all this other social stuff that's attached to it too.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, and I think that's big, is that this idea of fear that's in the background and dictating our actions. Like your story just made me think of a friend of mine who's afraid for his 4-year-old son because his 4-year-old son likes playing with dolls. And it's not even so much because he doesn't want his son to play with dolls. He doesn't want his son to bring the dolls to school where other boys are going to see the dolls. Because then you've got that violence again. We've got that fear.
Right.
And like, how much does this misogyny that we're programmed to buy into, at the end of the day, it holds up that sense of patriarchy that exists in this country. And there was a pop-up that came by. I think it said it was speaking to intersex and the violence that occurs against people that are intersex gender the second they come into this world, because there's something in our system that says you have to be in one or two boxes. So they go through like gender mutilation and like without any regard to what it's going to cause to them. Yeah. And like, that's something you don't really hear a lot about in our like commentary out there, but that's very real. And that is like perfect symbol of the violence of this patriarchy.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, Jan, go ahead, Zane.
Yeah, I was just going to say that was the intersex when I learned that intersex humans were possible, it didn't make me, it didn't help me. I don't want to overstate with it. It helped me understand that all things were possible in terms of gender. You know what I mean? That everything people were saying shouldn't be. I was like, if this can happen physically, why can't it happen in somebody's head that they completely feel different? And then again, why can't it happen in somebody's spirit? You know what I mean? And this is what Queen Talia, I think, was saying. It's something that I didn't say it, but back to the book that we read, that Raphael recommended and that we read in a thing, is that your being is the thing that is listening to everything outside of you, right? It's the thing that's reacting. That really doesn't have a gender.
Yeah. I think Mike brought up a great point when we talk about this idea of safety as a parent. Me being the father of an 11-year-old little girl, I don't want any harm to come to her, right? And so it's this idea of I want her to be safe, and what's safe in this world? I mean, she's already at risk because she's a woman. Well, she's a good little girl, right? Who will turn into being a woman. And so now we start checking off these different boxes. Like, yes, would I prefer for you to be a quote unquote a heterosexual woman? Yeah, probably, because it would be a lot easier. And so when I hear you talk about the stories of the father now wanting his son to play with dolls or take him to school, because it's just like this idea, I know all that comes with that, right? Now a lot of them are doing it from some of them are doing it from a place of concern and safety. I think because I think that parents who reject their children, I think there's a part of them that rejects them on the basis of safety, right, and not wanting harm to come to them, right, and so, but then it's that other aspect where, I'm trying to shoot them some bail, but it's kind of hard, you know what I mean? Because I'm trying to, because they're just not in the know. I'm trying to shoot them bail because then at the end of the day, like my mother said, you know, it's about this idea of unconditional love, and so I don't see how whatever society is offering is it that strong. And I reckon, you know, I ask myself, is it that strong? But I recognize it is that strong to have you not show your child unconditional love based on these various things. Go ahead, Jay.
I was just going to say, going back to what Raphael said, where he brought up, I remember talking about the father who berated his child for crying and called him a derogatory term. I see with that. I always say that, you know, especially with young black boys, being, you know, a black male, and I was a young boy, to be able to express themselves with a full range of emotions. Nothing wrong with crying. Problem is, just like what Raphael said, now an adult comes into that situation, right? And whatever issues they come with, they were the ones that projected sexuality into it and attached something to it in that aspect. I mean, he's just a human being crying, you know? It don't have to be a crying like a little sissy or a little bee or whatever the case may be. You see what I'm saying? Like, allow that child to have his full range of emotion, a human being. And then going back to sexuality when it comes to like children, like even with Dwayne Wade's child and that whole scenario is like, now to a child, what is sexuality to a child that's not projected onto them from an adult? You know, when you're talking about, well, the child was programmed that like, no, you shouldn't wear dresses, or, you know, you're a boy, you should, you know, and people saying, well, that's not fair. You shouldn't try to program to go one way. But then I would ask the question, when they decided that, when he just as a boy, when he decided he wanted to wear a dress, then where did that programming come from? Because it just didn't come out of thin air. Where did that programming, who projected that onto him to make him feel as though he would want to wear a dress? You know, it's not, you know, it's not, you just don't get to say, well, it's programming on the back end of it, because to a child, what is sexuality to a child that's not projected onto them from an adult that understands and knows what sexuality is, whether it comes from TV, that's adult programming. You know, because I know what it's like to be a small kid. I personally wouldn't get freaked out if I see a little boy playing with a doll. I wouldn't get freaked out if a little boy said, "Oh, I want to wear this dress." You know, I heard a story when the father, his son wanted to wear a dress because they saw the movie Frozen, right? I think he was like 5 or 6 years old, right? Some dudes, would, freak out and say this stuff. No, see, I get it. He's a 5-year-old child. It's not about sexuality. The star of the movie was a woman in a dress. She was the star. When we watch movies, it really resonates with us. And you think about a child, he wanted to wear a dress. That has nothing to do with sexuality in the mind of a child.
Yeah.
But when we come into the situation as an adult, that's where the sexuality aspect of it comes in. And then we start adding all these different lanes in that child's mind.
I mean, I definitely hear what you're saying, and I appreciate what you're saying. You know, it makes me think when I do think about, Zaya Wade and how she's come to be. I think is it a valid question? Sure. Does the answer matter? No, I think. You know what I mean? Because again, for people who are curious and I think we're inquisitive as human beings, we question what we don't understand, right? And so we have our ideas of what the answer should be based off how we're conditioning. And so it's who's to say that the conditioning hasn't been conditioned, like they say in the Black Star song. You know what I mean? Somebody got TV on? Not sure. But yeah, I can appreciate what you mean when you say that. Did somebody have something else running?
Could I just say that
Queen,
Zaya, it's their gender, not their sexuality.
Yeah.
We got to clear that up a little bit. It's not about sexuality with them. It is about their gender expression. Gender expression and sexuality are very different things. So I just think we got to clear that up a little bit.
Yeah, no, and that's I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, with Zaya, it's a matter of how she identifies, quote unquote, gender wise, right? It's her gender identity, who she feels she is. But I think Jay brings up a great point where does this come from? And I think but I think you had the answer, Jay, when you brought up earlier, where you was just like, yo, I don't know when I recognize that I just knew I liked women, right? It just was there, right? And so it could be the same with Zaya, right? Listen, she just always felt like a girl. I think that's a very plausible response. Go ahead, Queen Tally.
It's kind of crazy. Well, this is going to be an oxymoron, but I'm going to say it. If my son wanted to wear women's clothes into school, I would not let him. All right, so I had to fix my seat for this one. I would not let him because I personally know what he's going to go through. I know everything he's going to go through. I know the ups and downs. I know from right to left. I'm not going to do it. And no, I'm not going to let him take hormones before he's 18. Why? Because I want him to understand the purpose of transgender. And you say, well, Alonda, that's not fair. That when you had wanted to start, to be honest, I'm going to let him, I will get him counseling. Yes. I know I'm not going to stop his puberty because that's going to stop his growth. Everything that I went through made me the woman I am today. And anything that would have stopped me, I wouldn't have been me today. So yes, I would get him counseling. Yes, I would tell him everything. Now, when he turns a teenager and he could say to me, Mom, I'm ready to dress like a female, but I know what I'm about to go through. Then I say, you know what? Then go ahead, dress how you want to, but know what you're about to go through. And if anybody touch you, I'm coming up there with you. But I would want my child to understand what they are about to go through, what the world they are about to face. Of course, I will allow them to be gender neutral and have them wearing gender neutral clothes so they won't be uncomfortable. But that's all out of fear. Because in the Black society, it's not easy on anything that's different. And that's the part I would want to get into because I am in this group called Spice Game on Facebook.
Oh yeah, I was in there.
And I deliberately put this post up that say, men who date trans women are not gay, they are straight. In a matter of a half an hour, it was about 200 comments on there saying you're still a man and all of this. And guess who they was all by? They was everybody of the Black race. Everybody of the Black race. And it was just like, I ain't catch no offense to it because I already know what was going to happen. I'm secure with myself. And it was just like, wow. And what was funny was, it really wasn't men. It was women demasculizing men. And that's where a lot of it comes from. Women putting men down, making them feel low for messing with a female figure or anything that's different. Saying, ew, you nasty. I had a trans male or someone who was converting back to a woman saying I was nasty because I mess with cis men and trans men, saying because I mess with cis men, I'm nasty. They started cussing me out saying I'm nasty because I like this.
Yeah.
So it was very much like, what? I hate to hung up on them, of course, but it was just crazy how this person, a femininity of a born cis woman, or they was converting back, was putting me down because of what I like.
Yeah. I want to bring up. Let's see. I saw a comment from the people. Um, let's see. So, she done wrote a book. Afia wrote a book. African warriors wore dresses and earrings before we were stolen. Native Americans wore dresses and earrings before they were forced into camps. Our gender norms were handed down to us by force. And now we're fighting against being unbrainwashed. Stockholm syndrome. We handed to our kids further away generation by generation for who we were. It's not a comfortable fight to get back to who we were, but comfortable ignorance is super sad. It is. But there's there's a certain safety in it. I think there's a, and I see your face, Jay. Yeah, I think you might have thoughts. But there is a certain safety in in denial, right? Because you don't have to push yourself or try to change to grow. So it's kind of safer just staying in your box when we talk about this idea of things that are quote unquote different. What'd you have to say, Jay? You want to say something, Jay?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. I couldn't read the whole comment. Was it basically saying that
We
were
have
wearing
no we have no sense of self, right? We have no sense of who we are, especially when we talk about the black community. We have no idea of history and lineage, and that plays a role into how we're showing up in present day.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Yeah, there's a lot of trauma in the black community from what we normally would label as generational curses. Um, we are a lost people in a lot of different areas. Um, I don't. I'm not saying anyone on the panel does, but I'm not a fan of tagging like the black community as being like the ones that lead the charge on like homophobic type of mentality. Does it happen? Yeah, it happens in all groups though. Um, um, I don't see it a lot like with me, my friends, family members. But does it happen? Of course it happens. But it seems like straight black males get this label of being like the champions of homophobic type of behavior, which I don't think is fair.
Word. Go ahead, Zane.
So, I mean, what's interesting is that what Queen Tally was saying, she wasn't really pointing the finger at straight black men or cisgender black men. She was pointing
Oh
the
no,
finger
I
at
didn't take
women.
it.
No, but I mean, I was just basing on that point. So even though, and this is what is strange about our culture, our community, our people, is that I feel like a lot of our rhetoric is performative because my personal relationships betray the rhetoric that people spew in public, and it's very bizarre to me. And I my family are racist and homophobic, and at the same time they have this unconditional love that transcends everything that comes out of their mouth.
Everybody stop. No, I put Alan Cropper. I think he made a great point. Communities with less exposure to cultures tend to be more homophobic and transphobic. I think there's definitely some validity to that. Go ahead and make your point, Zane.
And no, and I was saying not that there's not violence. There's definitely violence in our community, and there's definitely people who carry the ball of violence against difference in terms of sexuality and gender, right? You can't say that. But then there's this other group of people who aren't as severe, you know what I mean, who aren't going around bashing people. They bash verbally, but then they in their home and they like I had an aunt say things. I'm gonna tell this story real quick, I promise. My aunt was 80. She was diagnosed with cancer. She drank beer from a straw. She used to ride a motorcycle. She was straight, no chaser, shoot from the hip. I was young. I was like in my 30s. I was with another aunt. We had her house. We sit down at dinner. And she used to ask me this question all the time. So she said, "You got a girlfriend?" I was like, "No, Aunt Bill, I ain't got a girlfriend." She said, "Well, you don't have no friend at all?" And I said, "No, no, I'm by myself." She said, "Yes, you do. They got a thing like me or a thing like you?" And then she
Yeah.
said, and I was floored. I'm sitting there, and she said, "A thing like me." I said, "Well, Aunt Billy, you got a thing like me." And she said, "Well, I wouldn't be a Christian if I ain't tell you. You got to give that up. Now, you want some more chicken?" Now, in my mind, it was an acceptance. Somebody else might hear that story and think that she was chastising me, but really, she was she was giving me permission because she didn't dwell on it. She was like, "Now the shit is in the open. Pass the chicken." I said what I had to say. You know I don't really care because you still sitting here at my table. I ain't kicked you out. It was the most loving rejection and acceptance in the same moment that I ever had.
Word. Go ahead, Mike. I'm gonna post this comment from Victor
Yeah, I
Jackson.
just want to jump in on that, Zane, because that's like kind of like the idea I was thinking of when Phil talked about. Now that's I'm going to leave that one alone. But when Phil, when you were talking about that, there's safety and denial.
Yeah.
There's safety and denial as an adult. There's not safety and denial for a kid feeling that denial from their parent. What's in that is trauma. Because like if I reflect back on myself, I can feel the anxiety I felt as a kid, that fear I felt. Now, like bringing it back to like my buddy with the kid with the dolls, it's as simple as having a conversation. But we're so scared to have those conversations with kids when it's all they need. Just to know that like you do have more space to express yourself, no matter what, if you're a boy or a girl. Like that. And so I think I love the way Zane like framed that with his aunt, because it's like I see what you're doing. I'm going to give you a little bit of me real quick, but hey, let's get back to having dinner, because that's all we got to get to. Because that denial after a while, man, that kills people.
Yeah.
It just kills them.
I want to bring up, something that Alan Cropper said, but why do you need permission? I think we need validation as human beings. I think everything we do is about acceptance. I mean, that might just be my personal thinking. That Raphael maybe can expound upon it, whether he agrees or not. But I think everything we do for acceptance, right? We want approval. It's nothing, because we're not doing anything in a silo where it's just us, right? And so the approval that comes from, whether it's work, whether it's individual, because again, we're we're born to commune with one another, right? And so it only makes sense that we need this type of acceptance, especially from the people that we care about most. Now, if it's acceptance from some random stranger on Facebook, nah, probably not. But if it's somebody this idea of family that we have, this idea of friends that we've been conditioned to think that it is, right? That these are supposed to be the most important things to us on this earth, then of course we're going to want acceptance. I think it's easier said than done, this idea of just going out here and just saying F it, right? Just having this effort mentality. Because I think if we look at the people who, I don't necessarily know anybody that has an effort mentality that doesn't care what others think. There's a layer of us that do care, and we feel good about the acceptance that we do receive, and when it happens. Bianca Thornton said, "We're gonna get to you, Queen Tally, for sure." Bianca Thornton said, "There's not enough empathy among humans, and that's a huge common denominator. Pain and empathy are two things that we as humans, no matter your race, color, gender, identity, etc." Now, I completely agree. Go ahead, Queen Tally.
So, what I have come to learn that I have learned to be accepted by people like me. So with that being said, I look for the validation from people like me. Like for instance, other queens or other femme queen or other trans women that looks like me, like what they think of me, how I present myself to them, or the older queens, if they tell me I'm beautiful or not necessarily cis women who look a mess, because their opinion don't matter because you look a mess. No shade. But that's who validation is important to me now. So I had to change who is validated to me, who validation meant something to me. Because now it don't mean no more. Like for instance, my grandma, I love my grandma down, but I had to stop listening to her because when I was younger, she used to say, "Oh," and I don't mind sharing my government name. She was like, "Oh, you still look like a dolphin," and I would say, "Of course, grandma, I'm always going to look like a dolphin to you because I was born that way." And look. But that's not what the dudes say on the street. And we were like, go add it tit for toe. She said, you was my best looking grandson. And I would just keep eating her. And we would just laugh all day. And she was doing it because she wasn't doing it because she was scared for me. She will always tell me I'm scared for you. And she had that fear because she had loved ones that were gay that passed away from the complications of HIV back during the 80s, the early 80s. And she was very close to them. So during that time in her year, she thought that all men who happens to be gay died from that. So this was her train of thought. So with that being said, when I got older and someone else in my family did, she thought that was going to happen to us. So she became fearful. But then when I said I wanted to be a female, she was like, oh, well, it's okay for you to be gay. I don't need no more granddaughters. Then it was, can you make me a baby? And then it became more and more. So with that being said, a lot of times, a lot of this stuff comes from fear.
Word. I wanted Alan Crawford dropping these comments I keep got to respond to. Said that straight cis people don't seek validation in their sexuality. That's a damn lie. Right? That's a damn lie. Who said that? Alan Cropper. I'll post it. No, well, yeah, I ain't gotta post it, but no, that's a damn lie, right? We do seek validation. We seek it from one another, right? We need, again, that approval from our peers, right? So we have, the conversations about our conquest and what have you, because again, we need this validation. We have to prove that we're quote unquote the man's man. Not all, right? But some. So no, I definitely don't think it's just straight cis people that they don't seek validation. They definitely do. They might seek it even more, right? To dispel any type of ideas about them, right? I want to get to this final question that I have, and actually somebody brought it up a little bit earlier, but this is Andre Jones brought it up earlier. Let's see if I can post it. Hopefully he's still around because we was actually going to get into this. Just talking about the idea of how do we raise our brothers to this level of awareness. So we talk about this idea of consciousness. We talk about what true allyship means and what that looks like. So I'll let whoever starts with. Well, I'll let you start. I don't think we ain't heard from. Well, I'll let you start, Jay. What does allyship look for you? Just when we talk about this idea of differing quote unquote identities or sexualities.
I'm sorry, can you
hear me?
Restate the question. Yeah, restate the question, please.
Okay. Just what does this idea of allyship look like for you when we talk about somebody with a differing identity, whether it's gender, whether it's sexuality? What does allyship look for you, and how can we raise the awareness of other brothers?
I mean, well, for me, I try not to overcomplicate it. Well, in this, let's just say, in my presence, you know, growing up, we all evolved to what we are right now, sitting on this panel. I try to keep things simple. I mean, at the end of the day, when you have enough life experiences and dealing with people, if I had to convey a thought or some advice to any of my brethren as far as dealing with subjects like this, is you treat people accordingly. You know, everybody assumes I mean, it's human nature. People do that, you know, whether they want to admit it or not. People is going to assume, people are going to judge, and this, that, or the other. I try to go through that layer, and if I'm going to engage that person in a conversation, or if I have to be in a certain space with them, then I'm going to deal with them on that level as a person. I mean, whatever's on the outside is on the outside, and I would encourage people to treat people like people, because, you know, that whole judging the book by a cover, you don't know who you could be pushing away. It could be a person that could be a benefit to you, you know, or a person that you could be a benefit to, vice versa. So, I mean, in a nutshell, basically, that's what I would pass along, you know, just, I mean, you can sit here talk about genders and roles, this, that, and the other. I mean, from one human being to another human being, that's where we can go with it. That's where I start.
Word. No, I think
If that makes any sense.
No, it makes complete sense. Like we see the humanity in somebody else, and I think when we can do that, we'll be better off for it. You know what I mean? Still recognizing that, you know what, because when you were talking initially before you got to the end, I was just like, oh, is this like, I didn't know if you was going to go to the white person who say they don't see race. You know what I mean? They don't see
Oh,
it.
no.
Like they don't see color.
No.
You know what I mean? It's just like, no, you
yeah,
just, but no.
It does sound like that.
Like, I just see you. And it's just like, no, I think we need to see that
Right.
the differences exist.
Right.
And,
Because
you know, go ahead.
No, I'm saying, I'm just thinking, because I think, like, where I'm at with it is, like, I know some people is concerned with race, like, well, I can never sit down with a racist or Trump supporter. See, me, I'm not like that. I could break bread with anybody. We can find some common ground. We don't have to agree on everything. That's the problem with a lot of, let's say, human beings. You know what I mean? That people feel like you have to agree with them. I don't have to agree with your lifestyle. I don't have to agree with your views. I can respect it, but I don't have to agree to it. We can still find some common space and treat each other accordingly. I mean, you know, with courtesy and human decency. But that's me. Everybody's not like that. I understand.
Yeah. Word. What about you, Mike?
Yeah, and I think, like, talking about allyship, especially among men who are dealing with like a lot of fear and a lot of insecurity around things like gender and sexuality, I think it's just about understanding that we're trying to celebrate the varied expression of humanity, right? It's not like, it doesn't have to be your thing, but it can still be theirs. Like, we don't have to minimize others so that I can live maximally. You know what I mean? Like, I can still exist how I am and allow them to exist how they are. And we really got to have a conversation around, what is this fear that's driving us to act this way? Because I feel like one thing that men are brought up not to really confront is fear. We're just, I mean, stop crying, rub some dirt on it, get up, try again. Like, it's like the whole keep it moving thing. And I think we need to get better as men. Like, I know if I have sons, we're going to have like heavy conversations, because I want them to live in a space where they understand what's going on in the world, right? And I think we gotta challenge each other. We just do. We gotta be willing to have conversations that are uncomfortable, and we have to sit in that space with someone else, because that's the only way you get to healing, is through walking through that discomfort. There's no healing any other way.
Word. What about you, Queen Tally? What does allyship look like for you?
If you don't know, ask me. If you don't understand, ask me. Now, because I'm willing to talk to you. Now, everyone, I can't speak for everyone, but I can only tell you about me. You know what I mean? I'm not a spokesperson for my whole gender identity, but I could tell you about me. So if you don't know, ask me. And don't, like Jay said, don't assume. Don't assume, because you may see this, and once I say I'm a Londa who happens to be a trans woman, that may go off with the racist and say, oh, well, she like this, I'm not into that. But you don't even know what I like or don't like. And I might not even be sexually active or attracted to you. So don't judge me. Ask me.
Word.
Because like Jay said, just because I don't agree with your lifestyle or something, don't mean I won't respect you. I will respect you for who you are. Just ask me. Don't judge me. Any question you gotta ask, just ask me. Come to me, because I am, at the end of the day, gender, color, anything, I'm a human being. I bleed like you bleed. I gotta eat like you eat. Everything. Don't judge me. Ask me.
Word.
Because everything that I learned only came from what I was taught. And then we have to remember that. Everything that I do comes from everything that I was taught. Then that means it's room for being taught more. It's room for fixing. It's room for fixing your mistakes. So everything that I do, I was taught. So that's what allyship means to me. Just ask me.
Thank you. Last but not least, good brother Zane.
Well, I was thinking that an ally has to allow themselves to be uncomfortable. And an ally has to realize that just because you have an opinion doesn't mean you have to share it. So you get to that space where you can learn something new. So I don't know how to get people to do that. And I mean, in the quick statements I was going to make is that if you talk about the Black society, the Black community, or just the Judeo-Christian community, it's hard to unlearn religiosity, right? It's hard to break out of everything you think you should be, uh, at least publicly, supporting, for lack of a better term. And so it's hard to be an ally if you think that you supporting something that Jesus is against. You know, you got to sometimes folks have to let go of their religious rules and regulations so that they can be an ally to another human being.
Word. And I guess I'll finish up with this idea of learning self. I think when you have a stronger, a deeper knowledge of self, I think that helps in your ability to be an ally. I can speak for me personally. I don't know. I've always had I had my foot in. You know what I mean? Like tapping in and out of allyship, right? But then if my friends will make a comment, or that's homophobic in nature, and I'm laughing, I'm not being an ally in that moment, right? Even if I knew I didn't agree with it, because why? That desire to want to fit in. And it wasn't until I started to understand Phil a lot more. I became in tune with my feelings and became secure in who I was. Would then I be able to have a conversation with the Zane, with Queen Tally, with Michael, right? To be able to sit on panels where I met Queen Tally, or to be able to watch a movie like Moonlight, or to watch a show like Pose and say, "Listen, it's one of my favorite shows," right? That comes on, and so with that, it's I attribute that to raising my level of consciousness. So I think first and foremost we have to truly understand self. Let me see what Marquis says. It's hard to be an ally if you think you're supporting something Jesus is against. but knowing that God loves people regardless of their choices, we're open-minded religions. Listen, and that's where I go. Listen, I don't know. It's not my job to know, right? Like that's why I don't delve into religions or what have you, because I'm okay with not knowing, right? So, and I think that goes to Jay's point. I'm a base it off um, my my one-on-one interaction with you, but then also I'm still going to be an ally when you're not around too, right? Because that's when we show, what integrity and who people truly are. Shout out to Raphael, uh, who says it's literally our job to stop that behavior as the front line. I completely agree, and that's why anytime I can use the platform that I have to enlighten the folk, right, and or just to have conversation with different perspectives, I'm here for it. I want to say thank you to Queen Tally, Zane, Mike, Jay, and Raphael for tuning in, and shout out to the people who've tuned in, who've made a lot of comments. Afia, my mother, shout out to you. Go get some sleep. Marquise, Bianca, she says, are we going to be having another live like this on this topic? At some point, at some point, we're going to bring it back and have conversation, because again, this is what we do. This is how we learn, right? This is how we raise our level of consciousness. So listen, I appreciate you all. To those who are tuning in, tune in tomorrow night too. Rhetorically Speaking happens Monday through Thursday from 8 p.m. to 9:30. I talk about any and everything. You can watch it on this Facebook channel, Quantify LLC, or YouTube at Quantify LLC. Again, I appreciate you all. Peace. Happy Ramadan, Vic.
Thank you. Hey, Victor.
Yeah, Bianca, this is going to be on YouTube. So Quantify LLC. Feel free to shoot me a message at